With Lesson 15, we're going to start talking about solving equations. I have listed 4 steps that you need to be very familiar with. These steps will get you through most of the equation solving process. You might want to write them down on an index card that you can keep with you when you're working your homework problems or when you're working in my math lab. And I'll repeat them on a couple of lessons, but they're good steps to memorize. The first step: we first have to simplify each side of an equation. Remember, an equation is split into 2 sides by the equal. So we simplify each side of the equation. And how do we do it? We distribute multiplication and we combine like terms on each side. Step number 2, we get the variable terms on the same side. That means to do that, we'll have to either add or subtract the smaller term. And we'll go through some examples so you'll understand how to do that. Step number 3, we get rid of any number that's been added or subtracted on the side with the variable. That's very important. Work from the variable side. Now, how do we do it? We perform the opposite operation, and we'll go over some of those. And step 4, our final step is usually, most of the time, we'll be dividing both sides by the coefficient of the variable. Let's take a look at some of the examples, and what I want you to do is to keep in mind the step that you use when you solve these equations. You will not always use all 4 steps. Sometimes you'll use one step more than once. Sometimes you'll just use 1 or maybe even 2 steps. So let's pay attention to which step we're in, and we'll write it down and circle the number of the step to get you used to where you are in the equation, because all equations are just not created equal. For the example number 1, it says f plus 4 equals negative 6. Now keep in mind, we're splitting this equation into 2 parts right here at the equal sign. We can do the same thing to both sides of an equation and it still maintains an equivalency. It's still equal. That's why equations are so special to us, is because we have that ability where we don't have that ability if it is an expression which doesn't have an equal sign. So this has f plus 4 is equal to negative 6. The place I'm going to start is my variable terms are already on the same side. F is the only variable term there. Each side is already simplified, so I don't have to do step 1. But step 3 says get rid of any number that is added or subtracted on the side with the variable. And over here with F, I do have a 4 that's added, plus 4. I want to do the opposite operation. Instead of adding 4, I'm going to subtract 4 from that side. That'll get rid of that 4. I have to do the same thing to both sides of an equation, so I'm going to subtract 4 from the other side also. When I do that, and I'll just draw my little equal sign to show what I'm doing, F is all that's left on the left. What happens to the 4 minus 4? Well, it turns into 0, which I don't have to write. But I will put my equal sign down, and I'm going to say F equals, and the right side is negative 6 minus 4, which is a negative 10. Now, an equation is solved when the variable is all by itself on one side. It's a positive variable, and it's just one of them. It doesn't have a coefficient in front of it. So F equals negative 10 is the answer. If I wanted to check it, I would go back into my problem, and everywhere I had an F, I would plug in negative 10. In this problem, it would say negative 10 plus 4 equals negative 6. The negative 10 plus 4, of course, does equal negative 6. So we know we found the right answer. Example number 2, where are we in this problem? We're exactly at the same step. We're on step number 3. Get rid of any number that's added or subtracted on the side with the variable. Over here, with my y term, I have a plus 7. I want to do the opposite operation. I want to say minus 7 to both sides. After I do that, on the right, I have just plain y left. Let's be sure we bring the equal sign down in the middle, and we say 1 minus 7, negative 6. I have my answer when I have a positive 1 variable, and that's what I have when I have y all by itself over here. Y equals negative 6. Now note that in the problem, first example, the variable was on the left, and in the second example, the variable's on the right. It doesn't matter which side the variable ends up being on, as long as it's all by itself, and as long as it's positive, and just 1, no coefficient. All right, let's look at example number 3. We have 14z equals 13z minus 15. Well, we don't have to simplify on both sides, but we do need to get the variable terms to the same side. Step number 2 is where we're beginning with this one. We need to get all of the z's together. What do? We begin on the side that has the smaller number of terms. In other words, let's start over here with this 13z. Since it's positive 13z, we're going to subtract it. We'll do the opposite. I'll subtract it, and I have to do the same thing to both sides of the equation. Now, over here on the left, I'll say 14z minus 13z is 1z, or just plain old z. 13z minus 13z goes away, and what's left? Pay attention, the sign in front of that 15, don't lose it. A lot of people lose it when the terms in front of it have canceled out. We canceled out the z terms, we did not cancel out the minus that followed it. So our answer is z equals negative 15. In example number 4, we're down to the fourth step in our solving equations problems. It is divide both sides by the coefficient of the variable, because all we have is 6y equals 48. We don't have any extra terms to add or subtract to get rid of, so we're down to the last stage. How do I do this? Well, I say coefficient of 6y is whatever is multiplied times y, so it's 6. I'll divide both of them, and I'm writing this fractions. When I say 6 divided by 6, of course those cancel and they become 1 times y is just y. And over here on the right, I say 48 divided by 6, that's 8. I have my answer, y equals 8. Example number 5, we're at the same place. We're at step number 4, divide by the coefficient of the variable. But the coefficient of this one is a negative 2, and I have to be careful. If it's a negative, I have to divide by that negative 2. I'll need to divide both sides by the negative. The negatives will cancel because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1x. And over here on the right, 26 divided by negative 2 is going to be negative 13. So that's my answer. X is equal to a negative 13. For example number 6, I'm at the same spot. Step number 4. Negative 98x equals 0. I only pay attention. Don't let the 0 bother you. Just look at the side with the variable. You're going to have to divide by the coefficient of that variable, both sides. Now, on the left I'm okay. Negative 9 divided by negative 9 is 1x. On the right, I have 0 divided by negative 9. And anytime you have 0 in a division problem, you got to ask yourself, is this okay or is this a no? Remember, our trick for remembering it, you put the O next to the 0. You either form the word okay or the word no. This one is okay. If it's okay, our answer is 0. And of course, 0 is neither positive nor negative. Next, number 7. Let's see where we are in our solving equation steps. This one has variables on both sides. Well, that would be step number 2 is where we're going to begin. I'm just going to write it down and circle it. I'm starting at get the variable terms to the same side by adding or subtracting the smaller term. The smaller term is 16z. Since it's a positive 16z, I'm going to have to do the opposite, a negative 16z, to both sides. Once I do this, I say 17z minus 16z is 1z, or just a positive z. These cancel, and all I have left over here is a positive 8. The answer, z is equal to 8. Example number 8, I'm already at step 4. I have only got a coefficient of the x term. That's all I've got to do. The coefficient of the x term is negative 10. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 10. Negative 10 divided by negative 10 gives me a positive 1x. And on the right, negative 10 divided by negative 10, a positive 1. X will then equal 1. Number 9, example number 9, I have variables on both sides. I have 11n equals 10n plus 21. That means that I have to start with step number 2, get the variable terms to the same side. I'm going to work with the smaller variable term, which is 10n. By subtracting it, because it was positive, I'll use a negative 10n to get rid of it. And now I say 11n minus 10n is n. On the right, the 10n minus 10n cancels. What's left? Positive 21. And since n is all by itself, that's my answer. Example number 2. I have something added to my variable term. So I'm going to have to begin with step number 3. Step number 3 says get rid of any number that's added or subtracted. I'm going to get rid of this positive 12 by subtracting 12 from both sides. Now, negative 36 minus 12, I'll need to add those terms together and keep the sign. On the right, 12 minus 12 becomes 0. Y plus 0 is just plain y. So I have y all alone, and it is equal to 48, and that is my answer.